As per usual in the other sessions we did in the spring, if you guys can drop your name into the chat, just so I know who's in attendance for credits, that would be great. We are still working on uploading the credits from the spring sessions because there was a transfer over from the old CSC database to the new one with Snow Reg. We haven't had an opportunity to upload them yet, so I'm working with Greg Frechette to get those uploaded for you guys. So I know that's going to be a question, but we're working on it, and rest assured, if you attended some sessions in the spring, you will get your credits. So same as in the spring, you'll get 1 credit for every 2 sessions you attend. So we're keeping track of that, so make sure you get your name into that chat. And then in regard to the next couple of weeks, we're going to have a session next week on return to sport. So there's a return to sport template on our website that we're asking all clubs to complete as part of their club affiliation process. So that's a session we'll run next week. And then we're going to do a training, Kip's going to do a training priorities a week after that. And at the very end of the month, on the 20th of October, we're going to have Dr. Peter Jensen join us, who's a fairly well-known sports psychiatrist, psychologist in Canada. He's worked with quite a few of the Olympic hockey teams over the years. And you can check out his website, which we'll link in his little bio section on our website. He's going to do a talk on how to get someone else committed to reaching their full potential. And Kip and I had a couple of really great conversations with him, so it'll be a really great one to tune in for. So I'm just going to let Kip intro us, the topic here tonight, and then it'll come back to me, and then we will carry on, just taking you guys through the template and sort of our experience thus far this year. So go ahead, Kip.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. Welcome. Thanks for joining us. This is not super riveting subject matter, and we apologize for that, but it's necessary. And I think probably a lot of you were on the club call last week. And at this time, we don't, as we said, advise travel, but we're not here to stop you or necessarily to say no. That's not really our place. We just want to provide the best tools and maybe the consideration, just to consider the need to travel, because we all want to get outside. We all want to get on snow. It's just there are some challenges associated with travel, and the situation we're seeing play out in schools with, with just symptoms. The schools and the workplace is very challenging. So you have to consider what those things might look like on the road. And maybe it's an opportunity to look at the season a little differently. But having said that, if we are going to travel, that we consider every aspect. And it's really an exercise in critical thinking. The information, provided in the document we have is still a draft. Things continue to come up. And I know of Canadian teams that are in Europe right now that are having some interesting challenges and hurdles. The list may not be exhaustive. You may need to add some things, but we want to provide at least all the tools to look at every aspect of the camp and first make a decision whether or not it's right or feasible at this time. And I also think we need to look at not wanting to travel now or in the near term does not necessarily mean that we won't be able to at all this winter. It's all coming to a bit of a head. I think early in the season, we're going to find out what it's like to be on snow, what it's like to be in training environments, and also adding to that the potential complications of travel all at once. So it might be an opportunity to just be a little more patient and tackle one thing at a time, like go skiing closer to home, and then see how that goes. And maybe we can extend the season or so on. But again, the purpose of this exercise is to look at what do we need to do to travel. And with that, I'll hand it back to Robin.
Thanks, Kip. I am just going to pull up a document here on our website, so just bear with me here, guys. I'm just going to share my screen. Okay, can you guys see the front page of our website there? Okay. So this was shared with the clubs last week. We had a club call last Wednesday where we went through all of these documents. I'm going to show everyone on the line here where you can find them. So you go to our homepage and you just click on this COVID-19 update. And you're going to come to this page where it's got a lot of different content, things that we've published, things that Alpine Canada, CSA has published, and then just a lot of other useful links. So what we're going to go through, what Kip's going to go through in detail with you is this COVID mitigation planning for projects at a division. And as you mentioned, it's a draft. We were talking about something this afternoon that we thought was relevant to have as a part of this template. So there's already something new. And it's just a risk assessment tool that we want all the clubs to complete. So it's changing all the time. So we've changed the template on here today. So the one we showed you last Wednesday has changed again. So nothing super major, but just be aware that there may be additional things we're going to ask of you based on what you see published here. So I'm just going to briefly sort of go over the roles that everyone's playing in this whole process. So as I mentioned, Dave Pym's on the line. He's the director of the Canadian Snow Sports Association, who is responsible, and Dave, jump in here anytime if I don't do it correctly, but is the FIS, designated FIS representative here in Canada for multiple snow sports, 9 national sport organizations here in Canada. A lot of the sliding sports, and responsible for mitigating and dealing with their insurance and anything and everything to do with FIS. So that's when you guys apply for an out of country project, it's always gone through Dave's office as part of an approval. And then obviously through that it goes to Alpine Canada as well. And they're our national sporting organization. And they have a vested interest in that component as well. Alpine Ontario is a provincial sport organization, and then we have our member clubs, which most of you are employed by or work for, volunteer for, and then we have our individual membership. So we, as the PSO, are working with you guys on your plans and kind of pushing it up the chain. To make sure everyone's aware, and if there's any questions, they can come to us and we can go from there. So Kip will go through this with you guys in detail. I'm just going to take you through sort of the steps once you're finished, and how it's going to be assessed. So I'm sure everyone can read this on their screen if they're on their computer, but you need to be a club in good standing. So all your club affiliation has been finished, your dues has been paid, all of your information we've requested as a part of the annual club affiliation is complete. All the listed athletes, if you are going on an out-of-country project, have the applicable SAIP coverage. So that's only mandatory when you're leaving the country, but SAIP class 3 does still apply in Canada. And all listed coaches have to be registered and fully licensed for the CSC. And when it actually comes down to the documents you're going to submit to us, everything's just got to be complete. And you'll see a little bit further down in the process, I'll be sort of that gatekeeper to make sure you're submitting everything and it's complete. The big key is that we want to ensure that the project is shown to be in alignment with our long-term athlete development model, and that it's athletically sound for the athletes that are going on a project with you. One thing we're also looking for is that the athletes that are going on the projects are prepared. They've done their the dryland preparation, and they're committed to the program you've set out, and they're ready to be on snow and they're going to be safe. So it's just some confirmation of that, and that the project's in alignment with the current restrictions here and where you're going. And that's really important, that you make sure that, especially where you're going, that you are and can show us that you've done the due diligence, that everything that you're going to be undertaking where you're going is safe and it's legal. And as I mentioned at the very beginning, that the mitigation document is fully complete. And you included everything we've asked for. And then these are the timelines. I'll let you guys read this. It's in the document, but it's a pretty quick turnaround. We're not expecting, it's not going to probably take this long unless we're completely flooded with mitigation plans to approve, which we're hoping is not the case. But if we are, these are the timelines we're going to be looking at. So they're all going to come to me. I'm just going to make sure they're complete. And then our staff is going to review them in collaboration with ACA and CSA. And if it needs to be passed on, so all out of country gets passed on to ACA and CSA, then they will. So that's my bit. I'll let Kip take over. And so Kip, if you just want to, I'll stop sharing my screen. If you want to share your screen with us, and you can go through the template as you like. Nope, you're on mute, Kip.
Really what we want to do here is just walk through and look at some considerations. Obviously you can read for yourselves, so I might not read all of this. And as Robin said, there likely will be some tweaks and adjustments, and there might be things resulting from your questions or comments coming to us after. The coaches, the OST coaches are on the call, and will also be good for context because they've been out of country. And and were instrumental in putting together the original plan. At that time, we were flying blind a little bit, and it took quite a while, but we're hoping that this will make it a little easier. But I would say that the important thing is, where it asks for websites and links and that sort of thing, read those. Don't just copy and paste and say, there they are, because there are always implications in these things. So this is the information we're looking for. We need to add a list of attendants. So the purpose is to reduce the risk while traveling and training and competing, and also to make sure there's a clear plan in case things happen. What we don't want is to find out on the fly that there's something unforeseen. So you really need to consider every aspect. I'm trying to close that. The plan should be specific to the projects and address all aspects of the project. So this is where, there's some critical thinking involved. So you need to look at travel, your lodging, meals, training environments on and off the hill, ski tuning, medical support, quarantine plan, PPE. As Robin said, look at the regulations at home and abroad. And this takes a lot of diligence because they change. And we followed them daily, and at one point found, I don't think I looked over the weekend and something had changed, which didn't turn out to be a big deal, but it could be. You really need to stay on top of it. And then look locally, provincially, and the same where you're going, because for example, for a while people coming from Southern Ontario to Northern Ontario would need to quarantine. Well, that's not the case right now, but that could change. So make sure you're allowed to go, and what's recommended. Is it non-essential travel allowed, or is it just not recommended? That sort of thing. And the same for where you're landing. You should have a good look at the availability of test centers and read the local guidelines. I think that it being early, a lot of the resorts are still figuring out this sort of thing themselves. So as an example, before I get into all this, we asked local health authorities in Zermatt, what's the protocol? And we asked the hotel, what's the protocol? What happens? And the answer was, if there's an outbreak in the hotel, people need to stay in the hotel and be prepared to quarantine in place until cleared by local health authorities. I asked the same question of a resort out west because we need to put it in possible plans, and the answer was, they weren't ready for that question. So I encourage you to look into it and make sure you're clear. And you need to assign clear roles and responsibilities for whatever might come up. Know and understand all the restrictions and guidelines that I've just kind of gone over. So again, yeah, find the links, do some digging. Hopefully the resorts or wherever you're going to travel, by the time that comes around, we'll have dug everything up and provide information for you. I mean, I would think if you were in the tourism business and this was, people coming to visit is hinging on having this kind of information, I would think that they will provide it, or they'll get to it. But make sure you know everything you need to know. So for travel, we're going to want to know what types of travel are you using. Are you flying, then taking a bus? Are you driving? Is it a group booking, individual booking, just anything? We're not saying you need to include group versus individual booking, but anything you think related to how you have it organized that might help mitigate risk or help you change plans, alter plans, should go in this section. When it comes to ground transportation, you might want to attach names to vans if that's part of your exit strategy. If you have bubbles, how are they being transported? Are they wearing protective and like PPE on the planes? Are they going to be, if they're going to be visiting bathrooms, obviously through air travel, or getting confection? As an example, part of the OST plan was that they should not have any confection. They should bring their own snacks, all that sort of thing. So anything you can think of to reduce the risk while traveling. Lodging, provide information. What type of lodging are you using and the plan associated with that. And again, when considering that, you should probably also considering the implications if people need to quarantine. For example, having 5 13-year-olds in a condo and they might need to stay in that condo for 2 weeks on their own. What are the implications of that, as an example? Meals, which type of food? And this, again, should be specific to any meals you're having. As a general rule, we would recommend just avoiding people going and having meals on their own and to maintain your bubble. But are you eating in a restaurant? If so, what are the local restaurant guidelines? And what can that restaurant tell you about how they will help keep you safe? If you're preparing your own meals, where's the food coming from? Is it catered, etc.? On-hill training, again, the name and contact information, disciplines you're training, anything you might be doing on snow to eliminate general risk and maybe risk of hospital visits. Restroom and warming location plans. This is something we always talk about. We're an outdoor sport, and we are, which is great, but it's often very cold. And we spend a lot more time indoors through a training or competition day than we'd like to talk about. So yeah, it might be something to think through. Are you driving half an hour to your location and have limited access to indoor space, or can you ski in, ski out, etc.? Ancillary training venues and study hall. So do the kids need to do school? Are you planning on going to the gym? And again, if you are, what plans are in place? Have you looked into contacting the gym? That sort of thing. Ski room preparation. We'll need to have groups of kids, usually in a confined space. So that will take some creative thinking. What will you do? Will you stagger, have small groups clean after each one, or each group have cleaning products, beyond what we normally have in a ski room available? Risk assessment and triage. Now this is, it's all important, but this is very important. You should identify staff members that are responsible for monitoring the daily attestations. So that's one of the attachments that they will need while at camp. Well, prior to going to the camp, they'll need to provide an attestation. And then daily at camp, everyone needs to provide an attestation before joining group activities. So who's looking after that and making sure you have it? Reporting procedure in the event of someone being sick or having symptoms or developing COVID. The availability of COVID testing and all relevant contact information. The communication plan, how are you communicating this to your members, their parents, or whoever it applies to? Does it need to go to the board? You know, does it need to be made public or similar? Your contact tracing protocol, and we'll provide some tools or suggested tools. And you should also, actually, this, I'm not sure if this belongs exactly here, but be aware of pre-existing conditions of staff and athletes. So if anyone, you know, has asthma or is a lifelong smoker, or you name it, should consider these things and the implications for them. A quarantine plan, what happens in the event that you need to stay there? Who looks after them? Who's delivering the food? If coaches are also shut down, who is helping everyone? And this is a tricky one. Something to look at is, you know, can you stay at the hotel? I think asking the hotel or the lodging if they're prepared for that, and what their plan is. Emergency return plan if for some reason you need to leave, or there's a significant escalation of COVID and the rules change at home or abroad and you'd like to get back. You know, what plans do you have in place? How easy it is to change your tickets? Do you have vehicles assigned that people can depart? Do you have bubbles where different groups may be able to depart if they're not affected and they're cleared to do so? And who has the authority to make decisions? Who needs to be contacted? Yeah, this sort of thing. Now, required PPE, this is a suggested list from us. You might need more, but these are suggested items, and probably on here should be required PPE for all participants. So each athlete or coach should have their own PPE and cleaning products, etc. And there should be, you know, guidelines for maintaining the cleanliness of rooms, etc. But the team itself should probably have some PPE. Like if a coach needs to transport someone that's suspected of having COVID, how would you do that and protect yourself, and so on. Other required documents, there are quite a few. So the signed participation agreement, an endorsement letter from the club or program board of directors, because ultimately, you know, we approve the plan, but they need to approve you going, or the club or program going. Contact the local either authorities or at the venue and make sure you're allowed to be there. The daily attestation, and you know, there are different ways of doing this. We use at least the provincial team and the high performance programs have an online system of doing this and monitoring. Maybe you're doing it with paper or Snapchat, or there are a few methods, but please let us know how. Everyone should do some form of COVID mitigation training if you're going away. And it's not enough to say, you know, wash your hands and stay away from people. So there should be a session. And I think kids will also be getting pretty adept at this and learning what happens at school. But again, it needs to be specific to the venue or venues. We have a logistics template. This should be completed, but I think this is for you, and it's it requires or it includes a lot of information that you may not need to share with us, but we actually have more detailed ones. But we thought if you're going to all the trouble of filling this out, you may as well have it for yourself. And we'd like to know the objective of the camp. Other considerations: plan to keep a daily log from the time you go to the time you come back. You should request a log of all participants 7 days prior, and try to maintain a bubble. I know kids are in school, but we can do our best. We should use the Canada COVID app, and often, like Switzerland also has one of these, or they were ahead of us on this. If that happens where you're going, you should use it. This is for out-of-country sanction requests. Go to CSA, and we would need a certificate of insurance by the club or the host venue. This is not something we've necessarily asked for before, but I know that resorts have asked us for these things in country. It was usually reserved, like it only ever happened in the US before, but now we're having to do it here as well. Robin has already provided this. The appendixes are here, or appendices. You can have a look at that. And that is all, I think, from my perspective. Does anyone have questions? We'd also, if Cam Stephen is on the call, one of the OST coaches, if you have any additional comments, I know you've actually been through this, you and Cam McKenzie. So if you have additional comments, recommendations, or if anyone has questions for Cam, who's done it.
Yeah, you know what, I would chip in from a coach perspective. I think it looks intimidating on the front end. As you start moving through it, you'll start to see things lining up and making sense. I honestly think it's going to be our reality for the next year. And, it will become a part of your daily thinking, assessing your risk. And I think you need to think like that. Always as coaches, we assess risk and safety first. And traditionally we do that on hill with fencing or with course sets or snow conditions. And I think it's a growth or another layer of that sort of safety awareness. My second recommendation is don't put things in your plan if you don't think you can do them. You have to be willing to execute what you write down. And then my third piece is, my experience, and Cam jump in any time, but that executing basics well, your social distancing, your mask wearing, your hand washing are still your best defenses. And that's going to become a crucial part of your job in helping your athletes to be compliant with it. And you sound like a broken record, but doing the basics well, I think goes a long way to helping keeping your crew safe.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, just reiterate what Cam had to say there. The plan's great. It's just the reality of the situation that we're living in now, and having a clear plan that you know how to follow through. I think is going to provide, not only a lot of safety for the athletes, but I think a lot of comfort for those at home and, loved ones of yourself and the athletes as well. So, I think it's important that we follow these guidelines, have a clear understanding of what we're doing. And then, I think my biggest thing that we learned, or that I learned on the road was, the small things. The plan's great to have in place, but the real difference for actually, I think, avoiding contracting the virus is your small day-to-day activities, keeping track of your attestation, your hand washing, your mask wearing. And it's from what we've seen, and probably from what people have seen around their own homes and towns, is not everybody is going to be as compliant as I think we're expecting our athletes to be. So you got to be on top of your group. You got to have the confidence in your group that everybody's going to be able to follow this plan and follow the day-to-day expectations and day-to-day protocols. If you can't expect that, if you can't trust your group to do that, I think you got to take a real good look at if you guys are ready to travel. Working together as a group and the small things make the biggest difference, I found, while we were away.
Thanks, Cam. Dave, did you want to?
Yeah, if you don't mind, and thank you very much for the invitation to this. It's a useful exercise for us in our role. I thought it would be an appropriate time to say that, first of all, we've now had over 600 athletes and coaches go to Europe, starting off very, very early in the game, back in the early spring. And we've had almost no significant issues whatsoever. And we touch wood that we will carry on. almost everybody has been following the basic outline of the plan that that has been very clearly set out by you guys. The important thing is the landscape is changing constantly, and it's changing constantly in Europe. And I think that Kip had cautioned you, check on a regular basis, because that becomes critical. What's easy travel tomorrow may be bad, or today, bad travel tomorrow. What was not in place in one location yesterday may be set out today. They're even setting out barriers in parts of Europe. If a community or a commune or whatever it is has a problem, often they can block your way. The other thing is, I'm sure Cam and Cameron can attest to this, don't be shocked at what skiers will do, particularly when they're trying to get on first gondola in the morning in Sauce Bay or something like that. All of a sudden it's a gong show. So don't be surprised at that. Don't be surprised at the difficulties in getting testing done in Europe. That still poses to be a challenge, and particularly if you need to be testing on a regular basis, which some of our athletes, particularly if you're going to be participating in Europa Cup and all the World Cup athletes, are going to have to be tested every 3 to 5 days. That's a fact of life, and you're constantly traveling. The test centers, though, have to be approved test centers by the government of where it is you're going to be. I think it was Cam Stevens said, you've got to plan for the worst. It will happen, and it's going to happen to athletes and teams that we have in Europe. There is going to be an outbreak within cohort group. Think in terms of small groups. If you've got a group of 6 and 2 coaches, you might want to divide them into 2 groups so that they become separate from each other. And the other thing that's proved to be important has been the issue of meals. And if you are, and the best bet is still to do your own cooking, one person should be designated to do the shopping, not every individual going and doing their own. Other than that, so far, the planning that's been done by you guys that have gone to Europe, by our friends next to you in SQA has been great, and by British Columbia has been great. And as you're aware, we've had some athletes back and forth across the pond 3 or 4 or 5 times, and I've been out of the country 3 times myself, and I've done quarantine, and I've done turnaround in a couple of days, because in some places, British Columbia has been pretty good. I can come back, I can quarantine for 3 days and go back to the airport and get out of Canada. So, but that's not necessarily true right across the country. But I think everybody's doing great. The forms are great. And that information for us, because we're trying to make sure that if something does go wrong, that you're covered by both your sport accident insurance for what its coverage will provide, that you're covered by your CGL insurance, and that hopefully we're giving you advice as to collectively what can make things go well. And thanks.
Thanks, Dave. Does anyone have any questions? This is a great resource to have on our call.
I've got a few here, but does anyone have any specific questions for Dave Pim? I've got a few in the chat that I'll go through, and if anyone has any questions. Alistair asked about the daily attestation. Does an app exist? So the Ontario ski team uses Smartabase through the CSIO. And the new online registration system that we have through SnowReg, I've been told has like an event check-in type of technology. So I've already talked to them about implementing that for our clubs. So that's something we're working on, and hopefully it's not going to be paper shuffling every single day. You've got athletes coming to train or do dryland. So we're hoping to have that in a digital form for you guys. But just so you have the questions now as a template, so you know what to ask. That daily attestation is exactly what the Ontario ski team is using as a best practice. So you guys can have that for yourselves. Alistair always asks, or also asked about a certificate of insurance. This still does go through ACA and CSA, and that's only if required. And we're hearing that more venues are going to be requesting a certificate of insurance, especially now. So yes, that still does go through ACA and CSA, and that document is linked in that mitigation plan that Kip just took you through.
If I can interject, we're trying to turn those COIs around as quickly as we can, but you know, you have to understand that in some cases we're dealing with dozens of requests at a particular time. So the procedure is either myself or Lillian has to sign off on the COI, and then we've got to get the insurers to make sure that they understand it because they're the ones that actually physically issue it.
Yeah, it's good to know. And we integrated, I think, a 2-week turnaround, which is, I think, on all your documents, Dave, for a COI. So at least everyone has an expectation. Sarah asked, and maybe this is a question for Cam and Cam, could you please touch on your experience on how ski lodges have worked, getting gear on, etc.? And is it easy to spread out outside? That's likely to be trickier. Can either of you guys speak to how the lodges worked? I mean, yeah. You guys are at 2 different venues in Switzerland, so maybe you can speak to both of those.
Go ahead.
Yeah, go for it, Cam.
Yeah, I think for both venues, there's not really a lodge situation. Zermatt didn't really have an athlete loading protocol. It was a little bit of a free-for-all. It was masks on. That was being pretty strictly enforced in all the gondolas by resort staff. Athletes, we were telling them, you know, most of the time they're getting dressed outside and they were socially distant from everybody else. So there wasn't a lot of interaction there in terms of using lodges for boot up and boot down. And then out on the glacier, it was try to maintain your social distance from other groups, maintain your own space on the glacier, but nothing was particularly enforced by resort staff or anything like that. SASFE did have loading protocols. So each team had specific load times that they were able to access the gondola going up to try to spread people out. And it was actually a much better system than what SASFE has had in past years. I think one of those silver linings to what we're dealing with right now is, you know, hopefully we can find some efficiencies moving forward when we get back to some sort of normal. But again, not really dealing with any sort of lodge group boot up, boot down type of thing. So again, a lot of it just went back to ensuring that the group knew what our protocols are, and everybody was staying attentive of their own personal space, their own personal responsibilities for that. Because at least our interactions out in Europe, other than, you know, enforcement of masks on gondolas, there wasn't a lot of strict protocol in place from resorts.
For sure, what we're hearing thus far in Ontario, and this is not written down in a policy anywhere, but what I've been hearing is that masks will be required. And I guess there is some resorts playing with the idea of like a tea time type booking, like what they do in golf. But I'm thinking that's probably not going to go that way. But for sure, when it comes to our groups, especially if you're not at your home club and you're going somewhere for a race, the indoor spaces are going to be what's going to be most heavily restricted. You know, bathrooms, lodges, parking lots. You know, what we're hearing is people are just going to basically use their cars as their day lodge. So that's a consideration as well in any of your travel plans, that indoor locations will be heavily restricted. I've got a couple hands up. Cam, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I would just say I think lifts are a perfect example where, once you get on the ground, coaches need to, with safety as your number one priority, you need to look at it and say, right. Um, I mean, it worked pretty effectively for our group, telling the guys to show up about 20, 25 minutes after the morning push. And other teams are doing the same. But I think that's a perfect example of some of the stuff that it's going to be hard to plan for in your written processes, but you're going to have to adapt to on the fly. One of a million examples of that. And on the other side, I think by educating your athletes, we had athletes. I watched Cam McKenzie give coaches the gears, hot and heavy, and gondolas, put their masks on, and we know our team was telling people that snuck into their gondolas also to do the same. And I think it's an example of where educating your athletes, you got to educate coaches, but also educating your athletes what your expectations are and getting them to be their own best representatives goes a long way.
Thanks, Cam. Dave, I've got a question from Jacques in regard to insurance coverage for hotel isolation after planned departure of team. And I know that when you're out of country and SAIP is applicable, that if it's doctor directed, that it's covered through SAIP. But would you mind speaking to that question?
If a person is ill, has to be hospitalized, or if a person is ill and the ill person has been directed medically to take certain steps, that would be covered. General quarantine, general isolation is not covered. So the one big difference between our sport accident insurance policy and that which is available for CAPE, the Canadian Athletes Insurance Policy, or a lot of other policies in addition to the rescue, the mountain rescue side, is we have no exclusion for COVID-related sickness or illness. But the key is not self-isolation, not self-quarantine. It's at the order and the direction of a doctor for that sick individual. So the group that are around that individual, there's no coverage for them because, first of all, they're not necessarily ill. So, and that's the best that we can do. We've had all sorts of things. By the way, if the person's also hospitalized, the individual, generally speaking, if they're a minor, our policy will fly mom or dad or uncle or whatever it is over to Europe if that person is a minor.
And Dave, is that just the SAIP coverage? Like, is that just out of country, or is that applicable in country as well?
Well, basically, it's only if you're out of country under the SIIP cover.
Right.
The chances are that if you're from Ontario and you get ill in British Columbia, chances are they're going to ship you out of BC back to Ontario.
Yeah.
Okay, they're not going to waste a hospital bed in British Columbia unless you're obviously in dire need of it. But so totally different situation in country.
Yeah, just wanted to clarify that for everybody on the call, that there is a bit of a difference between out of country and in. Tennis, you're asking about, are we talking about what coaching will look like on snow, masks required while skiing? We are just sticking with the kind of travel mitigation chat today. We will get to all that stuff as we go. And for those of you that are on the line that weren't on the club call last week, we're creating a COVID task force. So it's a kind of a combination of different types of experts in our community to put together sort of our return to competition guidelines. And so a lot of that, what you're talking about, Tanis, will be included in that sort of stuff. So we're a little ways away from that type of stuff, but we are getting there. Yeah, SCO asked about masks as well. We haven't made a position on whether or not they're mandatory or not, but from what I'm hearing from public and private resorts, that some sort of mask will be mandatory. What the standard will be, I don't know.
There's certainly, I can tell you that through Canada West, through ASSQ, and certainly the discussions I've participated in on OSRA, is the majority of ski areas will require masks in lineups, facilities, gondolas, on chairs, but not skiing.
Thanks, Dave. And that is all the questions I have in the chat. Does anyone have any questions? Sammy, I'll unmute you here. Go ahead. Oh, I gotta unmute you. There should be something that's popping up on your screen to unmute yourself. There you go. Go ahead.
Done. Yeah, how are we gonna, I know maybe it's not done yet, but how are we gonna assess rapid changes? Like during the summer, you know what, usually camps are set in stone. That's the day you leave, that's the day you come back. Right now they're probably the same, but going towards the season where we're gonna have races or something like that, we may have to do rapid changes due to the local situation or due to like changes that we encounter naturally. So I'm assuming then part of the document will be probably valid, but we may have to add information about where we're gonna go as a change of venue. It's just me thinking through.
Like as a backup, like here's our plan A, this is our plan B.
No, not really. You know, let's say you go to let's say you go to Panorama for 3 weeks, but then at one point, you know, you have to, for whatever reason, move out, and then you have the possibility to go somewhere else, or you go to Panorama for 3 weeks and your plan is to go to Quebec for other 3 weeks, but at one point Quebec is not viable, so you make a change to the first plan.
Got it. Yeah, no, it's going to be something that constant communication, and I think for any of those coaches on the line, you know, with FIS athletes specifically who tend to travel quite a bit, it's going to be, you know, I think I was talking to you about this today, Sammy. It's going to be a bit of a collaboration between you guys to maybe help each other communicate and come up with those plans so that you can make those moves and changes as we go.
Yeah.
And the communication's open with us as well, so we can so we know that your due diligence has been done, so you can make that quick change and plan and keep everybody safe.
Because when we're gonna go towards the season where we're gonna have races, this is a possibility.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There, in that scenario, there would need to be a new plan.
Yeah.
Yeah, and from our side, again, and I'm only speaking on behalf of whether it's the sport accident insurance, your liability insurance, or your FIS travel, the document that we're asking everybody to complete is not a document for permission. It's a document that you set out a plan. And no question, if you've got to make changes to the plan because of weather, because you're in Sauce Fe and the weather's turned shitty and you decide to go to Berlin to ski in the ski hall, you amend your plan. But you always try to stay ahead of the game. You always, and you keep everybody informed as to what you're going to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
And if you are out of the country, you watch the number of days that you're out of the country. It becomes very difficult to try to seek permission from the insurers to extend your class 2 coverage, which is 30 days, to extend that because of changing circumstances after the fact. We need to know about those things, generally speaking, as early as possible. And then I can say Lillian will fight like hell to make sure that you're still covered. But do not approach us after the fact. You've got 30 days of coverage, and after day 40, you say, oh, gee, I better check and make sure that we're covered.
I got a question here from Catherine for the OST coaches. How did you guys run meals during the training day? Were they inside a lodge or did they go back to their hotel? Did you guys carry stuff with you?
In Europe, we did all of our meals out of our hotel. We had our own room, so we're in the restaurant, but we had our own room where we were based. Yeah, I think just the challenge of cooking over there, we had to weigh, and I think to speak to where Kip was at, it's not necessarily there's a right way and a wrong way. I mean, we're planning for the fall to cook all the way through, but you've got to balance, COVID with, are they eating healthy? Are they eating well? Are they getting enough food? I mean, 13-year-old boys eating frozen pizza for 2 weeks in a row, your nutritional deficits maybe lead you to having other challenges that bring on flu and stuff like that. So, I think that's where there's not a right or wrong, but in Europe, for the most part, we were meal planned in our own room. Yeah.
I'd say half of our 600 odd travelers that we've had all through the summer, about 75 or 80% of them were having their meals catered, for want of a better word, in the hotel, in their own separated dining room from the public, or a separate section from the public. The ones that were doing self-cooking and that kind of stuff were generally teams, 2 athletes, 3 athletes, 4 athletes, 1 coach, that kind of thing. And generally speaking, the coach or one of the athletes was designated as the shopper, and somebody was designated as the cooker. Myself, I'd prefer to have a sit-down meal, proper food, and I agree with Cam totally. Some of these guys need to eat healthy, and that's the best way to ensure it.
Thanks, guys. Go ahead, Kip.
Just got a couple of comments. One is an anecdote. When the Ontario ski team was in Europe, it was summer, and all the things were rosier than they are right now. And then I won't mention who the team is, but there's a team in Austria now, and they've had to test 3 times for various reasons over there. And they were about to travel to a new location and had to have a current test. So they did that, but then found out that there was now a quarantine restriction of 2 weeks at the venue they were going to, and they had no backup. So just an example of, things do change rapidly and you need to be ready. And the other thing I would say is two of the words that come up in other mitigation plans I've seen are discipline. So that's individual, and then solidarity. Everybody needs to be very, keep it tight out there. And if we look at ourselves as a community, I think there's a lot of concern from, club leaders and people that approve ultimately travel, that we don't want to end up on the front page of a newspaper. And we don't, but like Dave said, that inevitably somebody will get COVID. It's going to happen. There's no shame in that. We do not want it to happen for lack of care. But we also, what would maybe put somebody on the front page of a newspaper is if there wasn't a good plan, and kids were stranded in a hotel room, or coaches were stuck. There was no one there to give them food. They couldn't leave. So we just need to be, as Cam said, honest about our ability to execute the plan and our commitment to doing it, and doing our best out there. I don't think, this is what we do. We're ski coaches, we're skiers, and we're going to find a way. I don't know if we need to rush into it, but unfortunately, these are unfortunate realities we're going to have to deal with. So we need to be cautious and committed to it.
And I think the only other thing I'd add to your comments, Kip, is that a lot of what we're having to think about and plan and develop for what our season might be or might not be is all with what's best for the sport long term and the health of the sport long term. And this is one of those pieces of the puzzle that are really important. And if we can all make sure that we communicate well and put together really great plans to protect the health of the sport long term, I think that's a really good thing. So let's make sure that we're one of those sports that keeps it tidy as we can, and keeps everyone safe, and we continue to be a leader in that regard. That would be, I think, a great outcome long term. So we're just before 7 o'clock. Does anyone have any other questions they had for anybody? All right. Well done. Thanks so much, everyone, for their time tonight. Appreciate it. It's great to see so many coaches joining us. And we'll reconnect again next Wednesday. Next Wednesday's session is going to be a little earlier at 4 o'clock, and that's going to be about return to sport plans next Wednesday. So there's a template on that same page that we took you through the mitigation plan, so you can review that document and spread the word to some of the other coaches. But that return to sport plan is what's going to be required for each club as they affiliate. So we'll take the clubs through that process. And again, go through some details learned from other sports and help you guys get back to doing what you do. Ski racing will continue somehow, some way.
And Robin, I would say from the provincial team perspective to people to not be afraid to reach out. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask for help with this stuff.
Yep, we're here to help you guys with that stuff. So absolutely anytime. Thanks so much, everybody. Have a great night.
Thanks, Robin.
Thanks, Kip.